Hi guys, Mr. Lambert here. Today we're going to be talking about the concept of speech and how this shapes society. So why do we use speech? We use it to help break down the different elements of the socio-cultural factors that help or that affect our performance in physical activity. So some of these are barriers and some of these are enablers. Now these are different to the biophysical factors like anatomy, exercise, physiology, skill acquisition, biomechanics, etc. Okay, so in PE we've got the two different factors that affect our participation. We've got sociocultural or sociological and biophysical. So the first one, the first S, stands for social or societal. Now these are the accepted norms, practices and behaviour in the community, which includes influences such as media and the government. So for example, physical activity and sport can create a sense of belonging to being part of a group, can motivate individuals to continue participation. Individuals who are not connected with the group will lack the sense of belonging and may be at risk of dropping out. So some examples are when you go and hang out with your mates, maybe just to play some pool, okay, or maybe you go down and you hang out with your friends to watch a sporting event on television, whether it's at their house or at a venue. Okay, it could also involve the element of teaching your young ones. So if you're a parent, if you're an older brother or sister, teaching your siblings how to play and creating that social connection. It could also just be that value of being part of a team and that sense of belonging to actually being part of something bigger than yourself. It also includes the likes of gender bias and the social norms that come with how females and males are treated within the sporting realm. Moving on to political. These are the rules, regulations and policy made by local, regional and national authorities and enforcement of these decisions. So, for example, these, depending on the structure of a school timetable, students may need or have increased access to physical education lessons. This may help them develop more positive attitudes towards physical activity compared to those students who have limited access to physical education or activity. So when we're looking at political, we can think about things like Westpac Stadium. Who's created that? Who's given the money for that? Was it just Westpac that paid all that money, or did they just have naming rights? And in actual fact, things like the New Zealand Government and the Wellington Council were a big part of actually fundraising the money to build that stadium. Also things like the Wellington Sevens and how that's really had a decline in the popularity due to some of the new rules and regulations that people have put in place. The push play was a little bit of a government idea that came out that was trying to encourage people to be a little bit more active. And again, it's a government initiative to try to decrease the amount of obesity in New Zealand. It could also be the transport, the way that transport is shaped in your area, and who pays for that. Well, typically, Land Transport Authority pays for that stuff, and again, it's a government agency. This last image here of the Springboks is a really good reminder of how some governments shape sport in some countries. So in South Africa, as many of us already know, they have the quota system where they have to have a certain number of black players playing for their teams, and this isn't just for rugby, this is across the sporting board. And that's just to try to increase the success of their native people. Moving on to economic. These are commercial forces, state of the economy, including employment opportunities and cost of living. They all affect people's access to finance. So, for example, community may not be able to afford a high standard of recreation facilities, which in turn may discourage people from being active. So we see that in this top left picture. Okay, it's quite a nice little gym setup. Not a lot of schools, can afford to have a gym setup like we have. We're very fortunate, and other schools don't have that opportunity, and that all just comes down to money. Okay, we have a salary cap, and that's that picture there in the middle with the hat. A lot of sports have salary caps in this shapes, and I guess it has a bearing on how much money people can make within that sport, and that's why we see a lot of rugby players moving on and going overseas. There's a lot more money overseas. We have this concept of commodification, and this is the boots down the bottom. Do you really need that good quality, expensive boot in order to be able to play to the highest level? And lastly, we have gambling. We have a lot of TAB betting going on in New Zealand, Everyone seems to think it's quite a negative thing. In actual fact, quite a lot of that money actually goes back to the national body or the national organisation of each sport. So if millions of dollars are spent gambling on the NBA each year, then the TAB actually gives back quite a large percentage of that to the New Zealand Basketball Association. So you can see how that can be a bit of an ethical thing too, because you want people to gamble so that some sports can get a little bit more money so they can get better facilities, better coaches, etc. Moving on to environment. These are the physical geography and surroundings, including lifestyle, location, and access to resources. So, for example, people's participation in physical activity may be limited to due to the cost, location, and range of services available. So if you're born in America, North America, there's a really high likelihood that you will play American football. Just like if you're born in New Zealand, there's a strong likelihood that you will play rugby. Okay, these are the stereotypes that come with where you live and where you're from and the environment around you. Okay, another example of environment is if your dad or your mum are surfers, if they're football players, if they're ballerinas, whatever it is, there's a really good opportunity there, or chance I should say, that you're going to follow in those footsteps because you're surrounded by it. Okay. The last two pictures down the bottom there are more to do with our landscape. Okay, if you're in a rural or country town, what are the chances of you actually going out and playing a full-on team sport where you require 15 plus players if you're in a small area that only has 4 or 5 students, 4 or 5 kids at their school? And likewise for the environment, the pollution that actually comes from tournaments or games, etc. How much pollution is created by everyone flying over to a World Cup or to an Olympics? How much rubbish is created by a one-off event like that? Moving on to ethics, these are a set of moral principles that define right and wrong behaviour, such as issues relating to liability, confidentiality, and equity. So these are an individual's values related to physical activity, and their understanding of what is right and wrong will influence their commitment towards being involved in physical activity and underpin the decisions made. So we, as young people, we look out there and we see a lot of role models in the sporting field. A lot of these role models are out there drinking and doing silly things, or getting caught in disabled toilets for some reason. So these sorts of things, these role models, we follow them. Is that right? Is it okay for us to expect our sporting stars to be role models? Okay, or is that someone else's job to teach us what's right and wrong? So we have a little bit of an issue with things as well around drugs at the moment and steroids, etc. in sport, particularly at the schoolboy level, at schoolboy rugby. Okay, so that's another ethical thing. Should people be taking drugs in order to be the best that they can possibly be? Is that fair? Is it right? We also have things like concussion that come into play here as well, and the issues that are around player welfare versus the entertainment factor. So all of these come in. They're all about what's right, what's wrong, and the ethics behind the decisions that we make. Are we here just to participate, or are we here to win at all costs? Cultural is the customs, practices, language, values, expectations, and worldviews specific to a particular social group. So, for example, the fitness culture often promotes sexually appealing figures to market products and services. Okay, and quite often these people don't actually have very good qualifications, and they just use their body as their qualifications. So another example of culture is our drinking culture in New Zealand. Okay, it's quite a common thing for us to see young people out and about drinking, and that's just the common norm. Okay, is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Okay, what are the repercussions of that? We also have a strong rugby culture within New Zealand. Okay, who's advantaged by that? Who's disadvantaged? Does it mean other sports are disadvantaged because all of the resources go towards rugby? Culture also ties in back to our ethnic groups. Okay, is it expected that Māori and Pacifica people can only do well in physical activities? Does that mean that Māori and Pacifica people can't do well in academic lines of profession? So it's the other way for the New Zealand Europeans. Can they or do they struggle physically, and so they have to look down the academic fields in order to be successful? And lastly, we have historical. So it's a past background and reputation, customs and traditions, which can become closely tied with cultural values and norms. So, for example, an increased acceptance and exposure of female sport through netball, women's cricket, women's rugby, gaining increased media. So in history, we obviously have the All Blacks. Okay, this goes right back to in the 1800s. Okay, and that's the, I guess, the history and the mana that's built up in their black jersey, and that culture, that history, builds the culture of rugby in our country. Okay, we must also look at things like rules and the way that the referees are playing those, and the rules change. Why do the rules change? A lot of the time it's for that entertainment factor, a lot of the time it's for that player welfare. Okay, we must also look at technology and how technology has changed the way that the sport is being played and how that's been shaped over history. And also how, for example, Lydia Ko, female golfer, #1 in the world for a period of time from little old New Zealand, and how women are now able to go into certain golfing clubs around the world where they were once actually banned, excuse me, and they weren't allowed to be at all. So that's our concept of speech. Excuse me. Got right to the end before I started coughing. So, yeah, if you want to know any more, go hit up your teacher. Each of these elements will be broken down in a lot more videos, so you can pick and choose which ones you want to watch and which ones you want to get to know better. Thanks, guys. I'll see you later.